heard that Garrett Asta almost didn't make it onto the pod today because he's tending to how heavy? 8-10 pounds of pastrami on a smoker. Oh my gosh.
12 pounds. 12
12.
pounds.
Do you need help with
Bigger
that?
than,
Do you need help eating that?
yeah, it's come on over to Maryland. It's bigger than either of my children were when they were born.
Yeah, undoubtedly. And far more delicious.
It's hard to say. Is that the traditional Thanksgiving meal in the Asta household?
So just to give you a sense for our gluttony, that is actually the warm up to Thanksgiving dinner. That's like the appetizer.
That's amazing. That's amazing. I'm gonna go out on a limb here. And feel free everybody to castigate and kick me under the table, whatever. Is pastrami is that traditionally like a Jewish meat?
Yeah.
Am I right about that? Okay. Is that like a heritage thing for your family, Garrett? Or because I don't encounter pastrami a lot out here. Like
I think it's largely an Eastern European immigrant thing that they brought over.
Yeah.
It's very popular in New York with places like Katz's Deli,
exactly. Yeah.
but I don't think it makes it much past the East Coast.
I actually think the last time I had pastrami in any form was at Katz's Deli in New York. Yeah.
I mean, that's the place to have it.
It is. So it's a warm up. So what's the main event? What's coming?
We still do the Big Bird and stuff and cranberry and all that.
Yeah. Yeah, you got to.
We also kick off the eggnog season officially on Thanksgiving.
Yeah. Yeah. We're an eggnog household too. Dave, for some reason, I think eggnog might not be your thing.
Absolutely not.
Yeah.
It's gross.
What if it was, what if it was rip it nog?
Oh gosh, that's even worse. I love eggs, and I very much like a glass of booze. I don't see any point in mixing them together.
Yeah.
I love it.
I actually don't see a reason to ever drink eggs. That seems like a weird way to consume your eggs.
Eggnog is like a more liquid version of custard, isn't that right? It's kind of a custardy thing, right?
I just assume there's some sort of mechanical process. And one thing I know about eggs is that the more that you physically disturb them, they just transform into other things. Almost all of them gross. Mayonnaise, eggnog, whatever you got, it's all gross. You shouldn't drink it.
Eggs, though, really,
it was already a good thing there.
Yeah, like it's the perfect food, already pre-portioned, pre-packaged.
Yeah.
Eggs are perfect food. We go through so many eggs. My kids go through so many eggs in this house. It's like about 2 dozen a week ish.
You guys have chickens?
Dozen eggs.
No, the frame for the chicken coop is actually in the barn right now. It's on my project list. We're gonna have to have 8 or 10 chickens.
Can chickens survive that cold weather? What's the is that normal?
My wife has designed in some thermal properties to this chicken coop that I'm building. It's basically going to be a chicken Ritz-Carlton by the time I leave there.
Chicken coop. Very well.
Yeah.
I mean, my parents' neighbors have them outside up in Massachusetts, and they do fine. That's the way to do it. Get some neighbors with chickens.
Or kids who really like to tend the chickens, which is how we've done it in the past. Although a couple of seasons ago, a fox got into the hen house and perpetrated mass murder, and it was like a bloody carnage crime scene, and it dissuaded my daughter from raising chickens for a little bit. But it was a very interesting life lesson, she doesn't listen to the podcast, so I don't mind saying she accidentally left the door open and there were foxes in the neighborhood and it was a known thing. And so like she felt really bad about it, which was a tough thing for a dad to handhold a daughter through. But it was we've recovered. I know that you were worried, but we recovered.
We bounced back.
That's important exposure for them to have, though. That's an important experience for them to. I've started bringing my son along deer hunting. We did make the mistake of taking all the kids to the fish hatchery though. And they did a fish hatchery tour, and I'm not sure if you guys have ever seen one of those.
Sounds gross.
It's pretty graphic.
Yeah.
They are hitting every fish on the head with a hammer. And then and cutting it open, scraping all the eggs out of it, and throwing it in a bin.
I don't know a ton about fish, but the eggs do come out on their own, presumably at some point, right?
They do, and then the fish. I mean, in this case, the salmon will like swim back home up the river, out of the lake, and up the river. They lay their eggs and they die.
Yeah.
So, I mean, these are
just-
fish that were going to die anyway. But
We're just
my kids are watching them getting.
We
Just
are all
accelerating
going to die
the process.
anyway. I don't know if
Production.
Hammer necessarily is always involved in the murder, but what do I know?
If you'd come out on the salmon fishing option in the last 2 reveal company retreats, Simon, you would have been clubbing salmon gleefully, I'm sure.
As the company's most preeminent recovering vegan, I assure you, I will not be participating in any of the various whatever that is.
Right. Well, let's get into it. Welcome to the Goat Rodeo podcast. I'm your host, Garrett Smith, joined by regular co-hosts Dave Cottle and Simon Kuhn. All of us are from Reveal. We're joined and have the very special pleasure on this Thanksgiving week. This is the thing I'm thankful for this week. Garrett Asta from Houlihan Lokey joins us. He is a returning guest co-host, and we're excited to have him back. Hi, Garrett, and sorry in advance for the rough and tumble conversation we're undoubtedly about to have. On the geopolitics front, let's start that. Let's start on that wavelength. Not a ton to talk about, except that it appears that a Trump administration proffered and negotiated peace negotiation is underway between Russia and Ukraine. A 28-point plan, I think, has been reduced to a core 18 or 20 points, and there's reflections coming out of there that at least the Ukrainian side is in agreement with many of the core items. The Ukrainians are saying there's good progress. There are criticisms that Russia is getting exactly what it wants. There has been Steve Witkoff, special envoy, and Secretary of State Marco Rubio involvement, and lots of commentary, lots of criticisms, lots of hope too, because this has been a particularly gross and brutal conflict. Observations, where's this going? We're now approaching 4 years deep on this thing. Is that right? 4, or is it 5? Feels like 5.
Depends
Feels
on when
like...
you start the measurement, I guess.
You're right. So it could be 11 then. Could be 11.
And for those that aren't tracking super closely, the Limp Bizkit concert in Estonia has been canceled due to Fred Durst's previous comments on Russia and Crimea from 2015. So the memory here is going to be longer than just the 4 or 5 that I think some of us want to think of the war.
Can I just say the shocker in what you just said isn't that the show is
amazing,
canceled,
right?
It's that Limp Bizkit is still around.
Extremely successful, having a renaissance.
I kind of heard that a week or 2 ago, and
they're selling out shows, baby. They're killing it.
I don't mean this in any negative way. I thought Fred Durst had died. Like I thought it was over.
Weird timing. The bassist just died of cancer literally a week or 2 ago. So hurtful of you as maybe the sole Limp Bizkit fan on the podcast. Very hurtful. Rest in peace.
What of what I just said was hurtful? I'd heard incorrectly that Fred Durst had died.
So yeah, rumors of demise greatly exaggerated, similar to the rumors of peace in Russia and Ukraine. Because I don't buy it. I don't buy it even a little bit.
Are you saying that Russia might not be a good faith negotiating partner?
Yeah, I think pretty much everyone who's ever spent any time on this issue whatsoever has taken this opportunity to yell at the Trump admin that this is a terrible deal and you are going to get rolled. To the point where I think there's a Vance quote that came out, Vice President J.D. Vance, the level of passion over this one issue when your own country has serious problems is bonkers. And my general political observation is, telling people that they're stupid for caring about X or Y issue that they care about is never a strong play. And I don't imagine they're going to get much out of this one. Wicker and McConnell in the Senate have both come out pretty aggressively against it. I would say that like the Congress doesn't have a very strong hand to play when it comes to these kind of, foreign policy conversations. However, the further we get into the Trump admin, I think the louder the congressional voice is going to be, being that this is the last run for Trump administration. But I don't see a resolution. I don't see any. I don't think there's any real pressure on Russia to stop. I don't think anyone has like put any sort of real strategic dilemma in front of them to have them accept anything other than capitulation. And I don't think that the Ukrainians are inclined to capitulate.
Yeah, I mean, all of that sounds right to me. I'm dubious as well. I do think this continues to reaffirm whether he's effective in this or not. It does reaffirm to me that the Trump administration and President Trump himself, they really don't like wars. They actually do want to end wars. I think that is an actual like desire and priority for them. Whether they're going about it in the right way, I'll leave it to the commentariat to discuss. But it does seem to flare up every 6 months or so that there might be a piece in the offing, and it's now dragging on. To your point, Simon, this is 2014 with the Crimea Little Green Men invasion. Many marked the start of the actual long-form war to 2014 during the Obama administration, and I don't see any signs that this thing actually stops. I don't think there's a good faith partner on the Russian side. I don't think there's any strategic motivation for them to stop, given the realities.
So there's a discharge petition in the House for a bill that would sanction Russia pretty heavily. There's already a number of Russian sanctions, but some of the House folks want to crank it up even further, which is like an interesting, challenging dynamic, I think, if you're trying to negotiate a peace settlement and essentially appease Russia with a bunch of capitulations, like saying Ukraine isn't allowed to join NATO or capping their military, and then simultaneously throwing heavy sanctions on them. And that has become significant enough that gets tied into a whole nother House argument about discharge petitions, because this would be the second time in months that we've seen a House discharge position from Republicans that is contrary to Trump administration policy, like we just saw with the Epstein petition. So Speaker Johnson's already talking about like reforming discharge petitions and how there's too many of them. There's only been, I think, 7 successful discharge petitions in like the last decade, and like 5 of them were this year or something like that. Like some crazy disproportionate, as that tool is becoming more powerful, and lots of commentary from the libertarian members like Massey saying that it's like the last legislative vehicle that they have. But this is going to make it harder for the Trump admin to negotiate a settlement when the American Congress is pushing in the opposite direction for not being tough enough on Russia.
I mean, God forbid that Congress, pulls on a few levers of powers to check the executive every so often. You know what I mean? Like,
what a concept.
I think that is, I think that's symptomatic of a deeper problem.
It would be very ironic for it to happen in foreign policy, though, which is a much more enumerated responsibility of the executive branch.
You're totally right.
Yeah. Do we want to control the spending of the U.S. government? Not so much, but we're very invested in the foreign policy making.
Well, keeping it alive, I mean, that's right in line with kind of the Massey Paul complex of libertarian inflected Republicans who want to be able to use that kind of a mechanism on the domestic front, probably far more than they do on the international front. I think libertarianism actually doesn't have very strong underpinning philosophies on foreign policy, except that they shouldn't meddle. I think that's but it's obviously a very low resolution kind of position to take as libertarians. Okay, so everything that we talk about generally is downstream of open, hot conflicts like the Ukraine-Russia one, and I think we do hope that it resolves, because war is terrible. But in the event that war breaks out, we need to, as the West, outfit ourselves to win. Hence why companies like ours are trying to, assault that trench line and build. Let's pivot from there into kind of the startup innovation deal book and market stuff. Garrett, before we started, we mentioned a couple of venture deals of note, specifically a couple of billion-dollar outfits, Forterra, and a couple of others I think you were mentioning. Do you want to use that as a jumping off point, maybe talk a bit about that and pivot into broader market dynamics, maybe from your or the Houlihan Lokey perspective? And I'll let you caveat as needed whether you speak directly for the firm or not.
Sure. Yeah. So I think the other one we'd called out was Chaos, which did
Chaos. That's right.
$500 million Series D at a multi-billion-dollar valuation. So between that and the Forterra Series C, which I don't think they announced exactly the pre-money on that, but it's widely rumored to be north of $1 billion. You've got a couple of pretty big launches earlier in the month. It's been interesting. You've got a lot of doubling down on some of the same areas that we've been seeing, right? Autonomy, UAS, counter UAS, and then I would say more broadly that's mirrored in the true M&A market as well. The one thing I would say is there is a lot of, I think, what many would call traditional defense that is being caught up in M&A. And so when I say that, I'm talking about essentially munitions programs and refilling the entire base that we've got. Anyone selling energetics, compounds, missile components, actuators, demand signal for all of that is just absolutely through the roof from a budgeting standpoint, from a procurement standpoint, and as you can imagine, M&A is following. So, we saw Voyager either last week or the week before buy an energetics company or munitions. There's been a couple of other deals that have been announced earlier this month. We think that's going to keep going next year in a pretty big way. So I'll maybe pause there. Pretty light this week, as you might imagine, but I expect there's going to be a handful of additional deal announcements before year end, and we're looking at a really, really busy 26 already.
We keep waiting for that M&A. I don't know if it's right to call it a bubble. It's almost like a negative bubble. People keep wondering the market keeps wondering what's going to happen with this 2016, 2017, 2018, 2019 vintage of defense tech startups. And when does that kind of M&A consolidation wave crash? I don't think we've seen that yet. There are obviously some like roll-up strategies in the works that we hear about. You might have some commentary on that, maybe you don't. But we keep seeing kind of big frothy venture rounds on escalating big valuations that kind of put many of these firms out of reach of traditional M&A in a sense. And so do you have a perspective on when that kind of M&A dam is going to break? I know I'm mixing a bunch of metaphors there. Wait, yeah, waves? Hold on, a wave could hit a dam. This is the same metaphor. Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Typically, I wouldn't build a dam against a large wave-forming ocean, but
I think those are called dikes or something, right? Levees?
Levees? I don't know. But yeah, I would say there's a lot more tactical M&A in the sense that, Kratos acquired I think it was called Orbit, probably $300 or $400 million deal. You're seeing, Firefly I think they announced it at 855. It probably looks more like a $500 million deal now based on stock price. You're seeing some of those types of deals happen. Big Bear actually just did an acquisition of a company called Ask Sage at a 10x forward ARR multiple, which is one of the very few in the sector where you can point to sort of the Bessemer benchmark, right? Now that was a $250 million deal, right? So you're picking them off, I think, before a lot of these $1 billion plus rounds. So I think you're going to see an acceleration of that. There are also
though. Sorry to break in, but when do you see that accelerate?
It's already happening.
Okay.
There were more this year than there were the prior year. There will be more next year. I don't think it's a floodgates open and all of a sudden everything's happening, but it'll continue to accelerate. Now, there are also probably half a dozen or maybe even 10 of these VC-backed defense tech companies that are in active IPO prep right now. Mm-hmm. And so for a lot of these kind of $1 billion plus valuation firms, that is the goal, is to eventually exit in an IPO. Right. And the big driver of that is there just aren't enough buyers of multi-billion-dollar properties in the market. Right. You get even an AeroVironment or a Kratos, and that they're buying a company here or there. They're generally paying 3, 4, 5 times revenue, not 10, 11, 12 times revenue. And so there's still
they're buying things on an EBITDA multiple and looking at actual kind of like normal legacy business unit economic type stuff, right?
They're generally, they can stretch a little bit, but it's got to pencil to an EBITDA multiple within probably 24 months, right?
Right. Yeah. Well, I think that I think folks like us and me in particular as a founder of an aspirational defense tech, prime, we're looking, into the future and thinking to ourselves, well, if we go really big, which, we're always setting as the North Star, IPO seems to be like the only logical point, and you could push that off for a long time. We saw that with Palantir. We're likely to see that with Anduril. Who knows when and if that thing goes public? I bet it stays private for a bit longer than people keep forecasting. Or take an off ramp early, and that's less appealing, certainly to the ego and a bunch of other considerations. But I do think that is a trend line that certainly the venture ecosystem generally, that's entrepreneurs and investors, want to see. There's a desire to see so-called exits or liquidity events happening in a positive way. I think a lot of people are forecasting currently that the most likely thing is that most of these upstart defense tech companies are going to end up underwhelming people on exit. And that's why the exits aren't happening, right? That buyer and consolidation dynamic just isn't as active as it would need to be to, keep the appetites of investors engaged.
Yeah, well, I mean, maybe we're all a little too tough on the industry because we're all in it. That's the case for every industry. The majority of these are not going to make it. But I agreed. Yeah, we're now at a point where a couple of years ago you couldn't say this, but there are at least 3, to my knowledge, companies that have raised money at $1 billion valuation that are at a significant haircut to that right now if they were to go out and raise.
Sure.
And to counterbalance that, and what would be good for the industry is to have more than just Anduril and Palantir kind of leading the charge, and Anduril hasn't, outside of, their private marks, hasn't exited, right? There's been some secondary, I think, taken, but, have more of those proof points where you can say, okay, M&A isn't the only off-ramp here. There is a viable IPO market. And I think that will be the case. The closest proxy we have right now is a lot of the space companies that have IPO'd or done follow in the last few years.
Right.
And, results have been mixed, but there have been very successful IPOs, and we expect that to continue. There's a lot of similar fast swim lane growth type of avenues within defense to space. So air autonomy, unmanned, CUAS, EW, all of these could produce similar type of outcomes for companies, and we're certainly rooting for all of them. Not all of them will get there, but I think there will be, of course, a class of companies that set that very high bar at the IPO, and then there will be a number of companies that have very, very successful M&A outcomes as well. I don't think that M&A in this industry should be viewed as the kind of second choice the way it is in a lot of other venture-backed industries, just because by the numbers, that will be the predominant outcome for many.
And that's true across industries as well, right? I mean, that's that's true across industries. Yeah, this is not terribly current information. I would say it's maybe 6 to 9 months out of date, but private placement data or private placement rev multiples for Anduril, I think, were something like 23 to 30x, depending on which kind of database you were looking at or which document you were referring to. That to me doesn't sound like something that can stand up to the public markets just yet. So and I hope they're successful in this. They need to catch up to the hype at some level before they actually pull the trigger on an offering, a public offering or a direct listing. And again, I wish them well. They're the trendsetters in the space.
Yeah, and with every multiple, right? I've probably heard 4 multiples on every deal out there. Is it run rate? Is it trailing? Is it forward? It's a little bit easier when you've got a pure ARR story and it's just your current ARR is X. But I don't know the profile of the business, but I think when they had last done that raise, they were doubling year over year. So was it 30 or was it 15? Right.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. You mentioned a couple of companies that might be, if not on the ropes, then experiencing down round dynamics if they went out and raised now. I'm not going to poke you too hard for specifics, but what can you tell us maybe about your observation on companies like that? What got them into that situation so that, the folks like me can kind of learn from that observation and ensure that we're still on the climb for future, not just fundraising events, because that's just an indicator of hypothetical future success and voting on the future. But like, what are the material kind of learnings from your observations on 2 or 3 of these companies?
Yeah, I think the common theme is maybe raising early rounds on TAM. And then as you have to get through not just product market fit, but eventually penciling to a multiple on whether that reality comes for you in a B or a C or a D, but there's got to be a multiple attached, which means you've got to have revenue.
Right.
You have to continue to show growth. And so, pilots or, short-term SIBRs or OTs that are 24 months that then go away without a real production tail. I'm not sure you can raise on those the way you could a couple of years ago, but they're not ARR in most cases. And I think some people fell into that trap of kind of counting anything and everything as recurring revenue, and not everything is always up and to the right. So when you're raising on a TAM and then you've got to go dig yourself out of a revenue hole at the beginning of each year, you're probably not doing yourself any favors in the near term.
Yeah. Maybe one observation or question, and then I'll shut up. I've been talking a lot here. But is there anything to the idea of maybe aiming for or away from programs of record, and the idea of penetrating or capturing programs of record as a way to achieve this kind of multi-year recurring revenue kind of stickiness that does not then put you at risk of not progressing your SIBR into a phase 3 and then going out and transacting at high volume? In other words, do some of these companies ignore programs of record and the legacy or traditional way of doing business with the Defense Department at their peril? In other words, is aiming for programmatic adoption and program of record ownership, is that the way? I mean, is that the way to do it? Or are there other ways, do you think, to build defensible, highly repeatable revenue businesses?
I think that's the most tried and true way to do it. Now, the fastest way to get dollars on contract typically is through RDT&E buckets.
Of course, yeah.
And so it's, I think generally people take the view of revenue is good and RDT&E will help me advance my product. And maybe it's, government funded ability to get from TRL 6 to 8 or 9, all on government. And so there are good elements of that, but, raising at a, 10x one-time revenue is setting yourself up for a very, very high bar for the next year.
Yep.
So you've got to then replace that revenue before you can think about growth.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. And the reason I bring that up is that I've observed, and I suspect I know at least one, maybe 2 of the companies that you're referencing. The one that I'm thinking of, and it shall remain nameless, and I wish them well, regardless whether I'm on target here or not. They oriented at O&M spend and kind of discretionary spend across forward deployed footprints and combatant commands, as opposed to aiming at programmatic adoption that would have allowed them to scale revenue significantly over a multi-year period and claim some repeatability in that revenue stream. And what that meant was that anytime there was a reprioritization or the vicissitudes of Congress going to shutdown or being on a CR or whatever, like their entire revenue stream was basically in jeopardy, like every time that decision was made. Whereas, and I'm not saying that Reveal's doing everything right, but we're now engaged with and adopted into multiple programs of record with multiple of our products. And that's a fairly dependable revenue stream when we forecast into the future. And I think that's what makes our company valuable and viable into the future and investable. And again, I'm not saying that we've done it completely right, but I know that there are some companies that have oriented away from programmatic adoption in that way. Maybe because it's just really hard. Maybe it's because they have a really cool COTS or commercially available product that doesn't fit cleanly into a program, portfolio. And so they're scraping and hustling to do what they can. But that seems like a learning point for me when observing companies like the ones you're referencing.
Allow me to talk some shit real quick. So I think a lot of folks in our space have bought into the hype a little bit too much on the idea that we're going to get away from programs of record. And there's been some very smart people who've written some very smart conceptual papers. I'm thinking specifically of, Mike Brown's Hedge for America about trying to get after capabilities of record as opposed to programs of record, which even if that was successful would be like by definition a less dependable revenue stream, right? Like the concept was that I can replace any of these performers very quickly and easily and not be locked in. So I think I get the sense that there's lots of folks in the space who are like, oh, well, all the smart people that think about this are saying we need to get away from that. So let's beat it to the punch and we'll start, doing business a new way, which is quite frankly dumb. You don't want to get there before the customer gets there because then there's no one to buy your shit. And I think that there can be, particularly when these hype cycles spin up, some wishful thinking about how DoD is going to interact, particularly when you get down to like the guts of the machinery that are not populated by Dan Driscoll, right? When you're like way down in the weeds of a program office, you're not always going to get the most forward-thinking KO or even those forward-thinking general officer. They may be very happy with programs of record and the way they do business and aren't going to shift off of it until someone comes down and like personally chops down their tree. I'm not saying that's necessarily the answer, but that is the sense that I get from a not insignificant portion of the defense tech startup community is I'm too smart for what DoD does, and I'm too clever by half, and I get in trouble.
Dave,
Yeah,
we've talked. Dave, hold on, Garrett. Let's get Dave in here for a sec. Dave, we've talked a lot over the past few episodes about this defense acquisitions ecosystem overhaul, policies and memos and executive orders that are coming down that are kind of restructuring and moving things around. Most notable in the Department of the Army, where they've been very forward-leaning in restructuring PEOs into collections of PEOs under program acquisition executives, PAEs. Are you forecasting at all in that whole mix that programs of record, this thing we're referencing, do those go away?
In the Army's instance, part of those PAEs, part of the intent there is to break the traditional program of record, buy, try, decide, and then maintain something and keep buying the same system or type of system and potentially iterated on it some over many years. They're saying, move quicker, put it in the field. If it's not good, drop it. Like basically they have a built-in consistent off ramps to keep from maintaining a capability that's not what we need for 4 years, which is the current going in position. So yeah, that restructuring is intended to replace old school programs of record and bring in new capability sets that are frequently probably off ramped. Sorry for being distracted in the first part of this conversation. It appears as though after we started the podcast, a couple of National Guardsmen were shot in the national capital.
They're both dead, unfortunately.
Yeah, and their governor just said that they are both dead, unfortunately. So sorry for being distracted as I watched that news ticker next to me.
No, you're good. Tell us more about that.
I don't think that there's a ton more information other than they're part of the West Virginia's down there as part of the mission.
And next to the White House, at least one shooter is in custody, or one suspect, I should say.
Dave, you used to not that I'm asking for any sort of official comment here, but in your previous roles within the National Guard in Pennsylvania, you were part of the National Capital Regions, whatever it's called, the response force or whatever. You don't know any of these people, do you?
It's unlikely. It's unlikely, but I still, obviously I feel for the members and feel for their families, and feel for the, an already tense situation is about to, I think, get a lot more tense, which is not good for anybody, and not good for the country still. But back to the topic at hand. Yeah. I mean, the way that they're organizing these PAEs so that the requirements can be very responsive to warfighter feedback, the way that where we intend to get an 85% solution in warfighters' hands means that I think program of records, at least for like the mid-tier and more tactical type systems, is going to be a lot faster. I mean, you can't rip and replace AH-64, helicopters on a cadence of every year. But for the smaller systems, I mean, individual weapons, soldier worn, soldier carried, to some extent, the capabilities that are vehicle borne and that sort of thing, I think we'll see start being ripped and replaced more quickly.
Even some of those tactical capabilities, like call it the inter-squad radios, like that's not something that you rip and replace on a year-to-year basis either. Those have like support tails and maintenance tails and training tails and all this stuff, right? So like even those are procured on a multi-year basis. Guns,
and
nods, all the stuff.
The stickiness or the moat for that vendor, it's also the integration. It's how well it works with all the other stuff.
Sure.
So you've got this article that I intended to bring up about Lockheed, or at least the authors got him quoted, maybe interviewed him. The CEO from Lockheed is quoted in here as saying, in this Defense One article, that Lockheed's going to change their strategy a bit, and they're going to pump a ton of IRAD into very mature prototypes, and that they're going to go and show them to the Department of Defense, reading which way the wind's blowing before they start their prototyping efforts. But they're going to present basically 85% solutions, high TRL solutions for procurement, and sort of skip the old way of doing this is you collaborate or work or do R&D, to Garrett's point, with like the national labs, the ARLs, the NRLs, the Air Force Research Laboratories, et cetera, mature a big system like that, and then compete for the program of record at the end. Lockheed's saying that they're going to prototype a full-blown autonomous Black Hawk, and then put it in front of the customer, and attempt to skip that long R&D many year and go direct to the customer. The problem that I have, to your example about radios, and also with the autonomous Black Hawk, that radio touches 100 different things in the comm system. So like, even if you have a radio that is TRL 9, it works, it does exactly what it's supposed to do. I sound like a broken record, but the integration readiness level of that radio is the thing that will kill you. Yeah. You could have a better radio that's half the cost. You cannot sell it to the United States military.
Yeah, maybe we'll treat this as a quick aside. You talk often about this internally to Reveal, and I'm sure you do with our many customer and partner counterparts, but you talk about 3 readiness levels that matter. One is technology readiness level, TRL. This is the thing that everybody talks about. It's like basically the only one of these that investors seem to know, and similar to how investors only seem to know to reference the NDAA and not the Defense Appropriations Act, which is actually a far more impactful piece of legislation. But anyway, technology readiness level, TRL, is just one of the 3 that we understand to be salient here. The others are integration readiness level, which is the thing that I think actually makes technologies and products sticky over a multi-year period. When tentacles are sunk so deep across that integrated technology ecosystem, it's very hard to supplant or replace those things without a multi-year, very deliberate replace. It's a very slow rip. It's like peeling the band-aid off really, really slow. And the other is manufacturing readiness level, which we see as the key item that like bites all these small drone companies in the ass when they're trying to come up, because you could build 10 of these. Can you build 1 million of them in the next year?
Exactly.
No, you can't. Right. No, you can't.
To your point, everybody talks about TRL. My system's ready to go. It's ready to be procured because it's TRL 9. Nobody cares unless it's also IRL 8 or 9 and MRL ready to produce. To your point, tens of thousands. So the IRL and the MRL are, in my opinion, just as important, if not more important, and they definitely are to the United States government, DoD program managers.
Because we're not at war. MRL's fake. I'll say it. I'll say what needs to be said. MRL's fake. If the U.S. government really wanted you to build a bunch of stuff, they give you a bunch of big, fat, advanced orders, and they give you a bunch of money, and you would do it as fast or as slow as the conflict demands, which is what happened in World War II.
But that doesn't solve for if it requires a critical material or rare material or component that isn't available in the supply chain, right? Some of these systems, if a program manager says to you, I want to buy 1,000 of them, and it's got a special chip or a rare earth mineral or something that's a like risk or that we don't have access to, and you sell them 1,000 systems, you're going to fail to deliver.
Yeah, and if the U.S. government actually cares, like when we're in a war, they'll dip into the stockpiles and the DPA, and they'll start flexing the muscle to make that happen, which is exactly what happened the last time we were in existential war.
And what happens in advance of that is there's this will she, won't she, chicken egg dynamic, which promotes risk intolerance from the private sector to invest in serious supply chain and manufacturing capacity in advance of an explicit demand. And so, this is why like people see the Anduril Arsenal 1 build out a giant drone manufacturing facility in Ohio as a uniquely risky proposition that only a venture capital outfit or a collection of venture capital outfits could invest in, because there is no guarantee that that thing will ever be used to capacity, right? And that's just one of many examples.
Yeah, and like really the bet they're placing is that we go to war. Let's be perfectly honest, right? Like if you want to crank that thing to capacity, the U.S. defense budget must grow dramatically in order for that thing to like really be up and humming and for more people to replicate that activity. And that requires a different footing. And I think you see a lot of people talking about how do we get onto this war footing, or how do we get into this type of footing in order to incentivize, the industrial revolution that we need to facilitate this. I don't see it. I don't see it yet. I'll say that. But like, I think one of the most important things is that like history is rhyming a lot here. And I was talking to Dave about this before the call. Building mature prototypes is not new, and it wasn't invented by startups. The P-51 Mustang was a fully built, mature prototype that the U.S. said, cool, go build 15,000 of those. And they just said, figure it out. And it was built by a North American company, I think, for a British customer. And then the U.S. was like, okay, yeah, we'll buy it. Yeah, if it works there, we'll do it.
I mean, that resonates pretty strongly with the article that Dave was referencing earlier. So the article is titled, "With Cautious Optimism, Some Defense Firms Lock In on Prototypes to Drive Demand." It's published on Defense One, written by
And this is one of those things where I'm like, you're not going to kill the primes. They're going to pivot.
Yeah.
Like Lockheed is very well positioned. In fact, in many ways, historically, wrote the book on like build a whole plane from scratch in secret, and then we'll just sell it to them. Right?
I mean, it's arguably, not even arguably, it is far better positioned than almost every other company in the space to do this, because they can tap into deep wells of capital and credit in the public markets to do this thing, right?
The only difference is that they are, I think, a lot more than some of these like very idealistic startups are watching DoD for the appropriate signals to be like, okay, it's worth my effort to do it.
Yep. So I want to call out an item here, and we've now talked about Lockheed in reference to this article, which describes Lockheed's growing appetite to invest IRAD in to build prototypes and to build products in advance of explicit requirements or demand signal or program solicitations or whatever, RFP, RFI type stuff. So they're shifting in the, let's say that they are looking or shifting in the direction of the more kind of innovative startup way of doing business. And then on the complete other side of that are companies like us and Anduril, who are trying to build things, who from the outset are trying to build things in advance of requirements, intending that once a requirement opens up, we'll be ready to like jump in and grab that business and deliver that value. But here's the dynamic. Lockheed and its counterpart or fellow legacy prime contractors have demonstrated a pretty limited ability to move quickly and spend IRAD on a flexible, dynamic basis to actually do that, at least in recent memory. And I recognize, Simon, your point that they've done this plenty in the past, Skunkworks and many other things. And on the flip side, Anduril and many other young companies talk a big game and like inflate and hype up their product offering, but what they really end up delivering is kind of a prototype at best that needs to go through, testing and evaluation. There was a LinkedIn post from the Anduril team that references this very specifically. It's titled "Newsflash: Defense Technology Companies Fail a Lot," and they go on to kind of get out ahead of some media story they're referencing about failures in the test and evaluation or experimentation environment with, I'm assuming, some set of their products. And anyway, there's this gap, right, where the upstarts talk a big game and can't quite deliver, and the legacy prime contractors can't deliver but are talking a big game in the opposite direction. It's interesting they're getting pulled kind of toward the same outcome, which is nimble, fast, deliver.
Yeah, I think delivery is a hard target for everybody. There's more examples than not of things that have made it all the way to program of record and gotten to the hands of troops. I mean, like, this thing sucks. And it often spends years, sometimes decades, in operational use before it becomes really useful and proficient. I know the Osprey was that way in a lot of ways. I'm sure Dave can speak very eloquently about the ways in which the M16 was maybe that way. I don't know. I wasn't around for that. I was around for the Osprey, so I remember standing around underneath it and thinking, is it gonna crash? It's gonna land on me?
I was very good friends with a guy who was out on the day when his squad was one of the test infantry squads that went up in a bird out in China Lake or in 29 Palms, and the bird crashed. That was early 2000s.
Yeah.
And his entire squad died, and he was out on like a medical call or something.
Heavy.
And, yeah, I mean, that's the real human cost and the rub of
So for better or worse, in 2006, I was one of those Marines that stood around underneath it and hooked up steel beams to it to see if it could pick up steel beams. Let me tell you, it's not fun. It was not something. And then I was in Fallujah for the first deployment of the Ospreys, which was fast. That's like when they were ripping and replacing the 46s.
It's also not a great platform to fast rope out of. I think they doctrinally don't allow you to fast rope out of it.
Yeah, there's the offset downwash means that there is no like calm eye the way you have under a normal helicopter.
That's right. You come out at like this 45-degree angle on the rope, and
it just sucks all the time.
It's not cool. It's not cool.
But to the actual topic, I really wonder what inspired Anduril to put out that post. Like, I haven't seen anything particularly newsworthy about their stuff failing. I think
it was, what was it? It was Next Gen C2. Was it Next Generation C2? It was their comms program.
Interesting. They've gotten a lot of flack about Next Gen C2, like not even recently. Like they've been getting. There's been articles. I remember there was that internal Army CTO memo that got reported on months ago about Next Gen C2 and the challenges they're having there. It's fascinating. It's like Next Gen C2 is a perfect example of the kind of program that, like, if it fails disastrously, I bet normal Americans are never going to talk about that. Normal Americans have never talked about the Blue Force Tracker and how much that thing didn't work when I was in Iraq. But like, they will talk if a drone doesn't work. Like, I do think you'll hear stories about that if drones and planes and tanks still work. But like, I don't know that anybody cares if Next Gen C2 is successful or not outside of us.
Sorry, I just want to correct the record here. I think you're right, Garrett. I think that I miscalculated what Andrew was responding to here. I don't think it was NGC2. I think it was Fury. I think it was their CCA, their collaborative combat aircraft test on November 10th.
Oh, interesting. Yeah. Which I can't wait, and like give it a few years probably. I would love to see the timeline of Anduril saying they wanted to go and build this thing matched up against like the program offering and the requirements and all that stuff, because they seem to have made a huge amount of advancement on that product in particular, the CCA, to flight and integration viability over a pretty short time period. I don't know if that's true.
I'd love to put it up against Raytheon, who's also building CCA,
sure,
right? I would love to see the two timelines of those two things, and
yeah,
it'd be a really interesting, like, well, who can do it better?
Yeah, or if both can do it to whatever, some min benchmark or some threshold, do you adopt both and you have that two vendor strategy, which I think was embedded in one of the Secretary Hegseth memos recently. You will have two offerings when possible.
I think Kratos has one too, right?
Could be.
Yeah, the Valkyrie.
Could be.
Clean sheet design, from clean sheet design to wheels up in 556 days is what Anduril says.
Yeah. It's pretty good. That's pretty good. Or if there are significant, like, not combat, but training injuries, training deaths.
Yeah, like that's the thing. Like when the VBAT, that Shield AI
chopped up the guy's hand or whatever.
Yeah, that's the kind of stuff. Like we were talking about this with Garrett. Like there's this, fail fast, break things mentality in like the Silicon ecosystem, but like in the defense space, the lowest common denominator is the troop. It's the soldier. Yeah. That is where the vast majority of the risk lies. And Next Gen C2, again, like no one really dies. Next Gen C2 kind of fucks up in training, but a drone goes bad, man. It's going to hit some 19-year-old. And
I'm looking.
I mean, it's pointing out that there are two awardees on NGC2, right? Like they've got the Lockheed off ramp if that's the direction they want to go.
Oh yeah, that's right.
Well, the interesting thing, and I could be wrong, like it could be about something else that I'm not tracking. Maybe I'm thinking NGCT because we're closest to that ecosystem. But I, I, I mean, the Army pretty explicitly adopted for this purposes. I mean, they're using middle tier acquisition. They're using fail fast methodology and contracting here, the same as DIU does, the same as SoftWorks does. So that, like all of those things we talk about, which is getting something in the field, have it fail quickly, go back, sprint, and fix it, was the intention, and I think that's what Anduril's saying.
Why? Maybe I'm reading too much into this LinkedIn post that they dropped, which has almost 1,000 reactions, 35 comments, 56 reposts. I don't know if these are big numbers or not, but the image, it's like a very short video clip. Embedded in the post is a vehicle, and I think a munition striking near it. And so I don't know if that's an NGC2 reference or something else.
Then I might have it off. I mean, NGC2 includes like autonomous systems control. So it's still possible that we're talking about the same failure here, but it also may be a weapon system or something they were testing that I'm just not familiar with. Yeah, so forgive me if I've oriented on the wrong program.
How far, Garrett Asta, how far in the direction of like big IRAD expenditures does a company like Lockheed actually, like how far down that pathway do they actually end up going before they start disturbing their public market positions? In other words, is this just rhetoric?
I'd have to go in and look, but I mean, an interesting thing here, I think IRAD for Lockheed has to probably be tied to a $10 billion order on the back end for it to make any sense. Before, I mean, they're not putting 500K of IRAD into little programs, right? They're either going to do it and pump $500 million or $1 billion into it or more, or it's just not. It's not going to move the needle, right?
Oh, I bet their math is much more complicated than that. Especially when you think about the number of like micro suppliers that exist down their chain. If I'm a big prime right now, I'm looking at, okay, can I use prototype stuff to keep some of these factories open as the line gets squirrely? I think the math there is way more intense than just like, oh, the juice isn't worth the squeeze here. They have an opportunity to like, okay, I can retask some of these resources in order to not lose my advantage in all these local communities, right? Like they have a really challenging like industrial problem set that I think that goes beyond that sort of like the way I think a lot of us think about it, which is how much money am I going to make versus money invested. They have more to think about, I think. I could be wrong, but that's my 2 cents, which I'm not shy about sharing.
So Anduril appears to be kind of defensive in advance of something. We'll see if that something materializes. Maybe we never know. I don't really know. But how right is it for upstart companies like Anduril to maybe cast a big vision about what something could be? Like, maybe let's get into like an ethics conversation here. Is that an ethical activity? Like, we live in startup space. I sometimes cast a big vision. I talk to investors about kind of what things will look like if we're successful in +2, +5 years from now. And a lot of that is just kind of like, I mean, it's real, it's intention, but it's not actual delivered value and capability. And at some level, that get the gap between my vision statement and the current state of product reality is the thing that we work on in the intervening period. But is it an ethical thing to tell the government that you can do X and then you're not quite there, you're almost there, and you kind of finish it out in partnership with them in their ecosystem and a test and evaluation venue or something like that? At some level, like, this is why Silicon Valley is so successful, because they cast a big vision and they work against it tirelessly and put a ton of risk capital against it and end up delivering in many cases. But sometimes they don't. In other words, is doing that in the defense market an ethical activity, or should that change? And I guess, the market of public opinion and customer attitude will be the final say here, whether that trust gap remains in place with companies like Anduril or like ours. How ethical do we think that is?
I think there's a pretty big gap between the Silicon Valley sales guys saying, "Oh yeah, we can do that," and turning around and telling the product guy, "Go build that for me."
Right.
Piece of code that, I don't know, maybe it's like 10 scrum teams away from getting done, right? Versus like something that's gonna fly or shoot or detect something that is gonna cause real risk for the warfighter. I don't get the sense that people are saying, "Oh yeah, I could build a helicopter, in 6 months." It just doesn't seem like they're there. Maybe it's over promising in terms of capability at an exercise, and
Sure.
accelerate timeline.
Yeah.
But I don't know. Far be it for me to cast moral judgment on anyone who's trying to develop in this ecosystem.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think there's going to be any one surefire answer to that question either. I think it really comes down to whether you've got the trust and confidence with your program management counterpart and acquisitions counterpart. And if they understand that there's a bit of a gap and they're willing to work with you, the company, on making up the ground in that gap, they're comfortable with that. They're comfortable with that risk profile. And the contracting method there is diversified enough to ensure that if there's a fail or a shortfall or a time gap or whatever, that they can still deliver capability. To me, that seems like a partnership and transparency working relationship element more than it is a broad statement on what is or what is not ethical.
I'll take a contrary position to my normal contrary position. The government fails to deliver on promises all the time. There's nothing unethical about like taking a swing in good faith. The amount of the untold trillions of dollars of government spending that produced nothing. It's fine. It's just fine.
Wow.
The government holds no like moral compass that doesn't exist. It is an amoral. Governments are amoral entities by default. This is if anyone's interested, the whole nature of. Now I've lost the term moral injury. The whole concept of moral injury is because the morality that the government gives you is a non-existent entity, and therefore you grow up later. So yeah, I don't think there's any problems with like making a promise to the government that we can do a thing and trying really hard to do the thing. And sometimes things go wrong. It's different if you know explicitly the thing cannot be done and I'm trying to grab some money and get out from under the consequences. But yeah, I mean, if you've got all the due diligence and work to prove that this is an achievable outcome and the nation needs it, I'm okay with that.
Well, and outside of a handful of press releases over the last 18 months, the government's posture has not normally been show up with something COTS that works 100% and can plug in on day one.
Yeah.
And so there is a willingness to accept something less than completely done.
My favorite airplane of this type is the B-17, which lost its first competition. And the B-17 was entirely funded and built by Boeing. Showed up to a 4-bomber like fly off and lost and did not win the contract. And then like later had to be revisited when they needed, more capacity. But yeah, like it's fine. It really is just fine. Yeah, I think there's a real, and we talked about risk a lot, but there's this real desire that like whoever wins has to be, that's it. You have to get it right exactly. And it's very unlikely you're going to get anything right exactly.
I think I agree with you, Garrett, that certainly the risk tolerance has been growing explicitly in policy memos and executive orders around this. Bring your commercial solution. We'll test and evaluate and experiment, and we'll let contracts to refine and improve it so that it's integration and manufacturing ready and the TRL is up and all the stuff. I do think there's an increased appetite to work on that basis. And so I'm still curious what this Anduril post is in response to, but I got to believe that at some level, if their program counterparts are, willing partners with them in developing and deploying a new capability, I don't see anything wrong with it either. We'll see. Okay. I've got a turkey brining in a big refrigerator just on the other side of this wall that I'm pointing to behind me. Do you guys brine a turkey? What do you do? You brine it, Dave? Okay.
Mine's in the brine.
Yeah.
Mine's in the brine.
I'm going to call the Chinese food place whenever we finish up and they'll take care of me.
That's great.
Like a real American.
Yeah, like a real American. So are you flying solo Thanksgiving, Simon? Because
no,
our table is always open for you.
Yeah, just a short hot.
And I heard Garrett offer smoked pastrami as the appetizer to the main event, and I think he said that they have room at their table.
Next year I'll road trip through. I'll just drive up to Michigan, hit Dave, catch Bozeman, and then California at the end. It'll be good.
Yeah, Bozeman's right on the way to Michigan.
Well, Michigan first and then Bozeman.
Yeah,
Go up,
yeah.
cut.
And if the bird flies.
That's
I think going to Garrett, I think if you're going to Bozeman, you're actually still going up. I mean, you're going west, but I think it's actually north of where I am.
God.
Oh, is that true?
Yeah.
Maybe we can
I think
look
so.
that up. Garrett, any reflections? We'll give you the last word as the returning guest co-host. And again, welcome anytime.
Put me on the spot. I'll just say happy Thanksgiving, everyone. Thankful to be American and thankful to be on the Goat Rodeo podcast.
Well said. I couldn't have said it better. And enjoy that Chinese food, Simon. We'll see you next year in Bozeman.
Thanks, buddy.
See you guys.